Welcome to Learn to RV. Tonight, or today, or whenever you're listening, we're going to talk about getting your RV ready for spring. Tasha's calling it de-winterizing. I threw on some flowers because I think we should talk about spring. We're going to hop right into it because, the road is calling so many RVers across the country now. Whether you've been in Florida or some southern state, you've kind of sat stiller than normal, or maybe you're up in the north and you've been waiting for that great thaw to come out. But is your RV ready? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the checklists and everything you need to think about and do and what you can't overlook. This is something I want to make sure we get into tonight. What does winter storage do to your RV? Do you know, Tasha?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have not had to do very much winter storage because we basically moved straight into ours. But I do know from reading some RV roofing solutions blogs that depending on how you store your RV, if you use a cover over your RV, that can actually wear down your roofing material depending on how the wind was and the weather was outside if you were outside with your rig. So that's definitely something to put at the top of your list, is checking your roof and checking all of your caulking, and is there a point of entry for moisture and all of those
For sure.
dirty little dogs.
That's one of the things that is one of the most overlooked areas. Any type of cover, you always have the rubbing that people don't think about along the radius. The roof is ultimately one of the top things where you have to worry about water getting in. And it's actually the last thing on my list today, but I'm going to hop right into it as the first because you brought it up. So worn sealant, it's gotten colder, and so it can actually degrade just based on temperature. Some areas you want to focus on when you're doing any type of roof inspection is walking the entire thing, feeling for soft spots. Hands and knees is often best because you get the most surface area. We get asked all the time, do you use a drone to check the roof? No, we don't. We like to feel if there's anything soft. If you do feel a soft spot, you want to be careful. One of the things I tell people, in fact, I was just talking to Bunky Griffith, one of our followers today, and he was telling me how last year he fell off a telescoping ladder. So have a good solid ladder. That's very important because you don't want to risk a fall going up or down on that roof. Spring is a great time to do those checks and make sure that everything is okay. So many times that's one of the things that we often miss because we think we're good. Know when the last time your caulk was removed and replaced. This is the time our phones start ringing like crazy. We can book out 12, 14 weeks this time of year with people that find a leak. And then we also have customers that will call us and say, hey, I want to do this before I have a leak. And there's kind of a give and take on both of those.
Yeah.
But if you need to know how to do a roof inspection, we're happy to walk you through it. And if you find something, you can always send us a picture and say, I'm a DIYer. I'm not looking for an estimate, but would you help me navigate what this looks like? We've done that for people too. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all RVers, and that's what's important.
Right. So I jumped to the end of your list, but what was your number one? Like, this is straight out the gate, the first thing that you should be looking for.
So mine is actually a walk around. So take the time to just walk around your rig. And it sounds silly and it sounds so easy, but I think that we miss so much when we don't do a walk around.
Yeah.
When your rig is sitting for the winter, there's all sorts of things that can happen, and we're going to get into each one individually. But a spring walk around starts at the front and kind of walks around systematically to see nothing skipped. So you want to open those bay doors, make sure there's no water intrusion inside any of those portals, because the reality is the seals can change over the course of temperature and, things can happen. You want to look for signs of animals, and we'll dive a little deeper into that one. But a lot of times somebody may have taken up residence in your RV that you didn't expect to be there. Check your hitch, check your safety chains, brake controller connections. All of those things are super important before you take it out first time on the road. If you were doing an exterior inspection on your rig, you guys are in the process of buying a new rig. The process is very similar, an exterior inspection. So what are some things there that you think you'd want to look for?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing that I look for is, and I look for this inside too, but I look for any sort of bubbling in the material. If there's air between the wood and the outside material, that delamination is one of the very first things that I look for, because that's going to tell me that there's been some water damage somewhere that has gotten in. The other thing that I look for, I like to look underneath the slides and see if there's any damage or wear on the bottom of those just to make sure that everything is looking a-okay. There's not any signs of water damage. I'm always looking for water is my biggest fear in my
Right.
RV because it is like
Well, and water comes
it's
from all places. Like, that's the thing is
yes,
if you're running heaters and it's cold outside, you can have condensation on the walls that can do damage. So, it's
yes,
not just exterior damage that you're looking for. So if you've done some winter camping, you may have run your heater and you may have had some moisture on your windows that you didn't notice. I mean, we keep reflectix in the windows and, every couple days we check them to make sure there's no moisture building up there. But
yeah.
also, the thing is all of your sealants can become brittle because
Mhm.
as the temperatures change, sealants have different points of time. There's
Yeah.
chemical makeups. It depends on what the chemical's made of, what its freeze point is, and if it cured before you finished putting it on last year. It depends on a lot of different factors, or maybe you haven't done it in a couple of years. So spring is just a great time to spring clean and get the camper ready all at the same time.
Yeah,
What about your
absolutely.
windows? What do you think about there?
Well, so I think about the sealant around windows, and I think about any of that that has kind of pulled away from the wall or created room for moisture. Again, water, my best friend if I'm at the beach, my worst nightmare if I'm in my RV. Okay.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
I so that's one of the things I'm looking at. I'm also looking to see if any cracks or anything have started to develop, especially like in my skylights during the winter. Those they're just not they're just not the strongest materials, and so if you've got a lot of changes in degrees of temperature, especially if you live in the Midwest, one of the things that we were laughing about the other day is that no matter where you live, somebody's always saying, "Oh yeah, if you don't like the temperature, just give it an hour, it'll be 40 degrees different." And so in that Midwest area, if you're storing your rig may be in 70-degree weather one day and under snow the next day. And that fluctuation of temperature can really cause the materials to expand and contract. So I look at my skylights to make sure that they're not developing any sort of cracks or anything that maybe I wouldn't look at on a regular basis, especially with them being, again, you would see that when you're doing your roof inspection, but I think that's a really important place to look as well.
Well, and around the windows, it's good to touch along the wall, especially at the bottom, but along the whole wall to make sure there's no soft spots anywhere. One of the
Yeah.
things that a lot of people, and you'll see it in Facebook groups all the time, where it almost looks like there's dimples under your wallpaper. 9 times out of 10, that's actually mold starting. That means there's a leak somewhere or moisture getting in
Yeah.
somewhere behind the wallboard. A lot of
Yeah.
times, if you cut them open, it just exposes that. You have to be real careful with that. Your slides, put them out and get them ready for the season, because that's the next thing that I want you to do is check all the slides. On the rig you're purchasing, you found out they're hydraulic slides and the hydraulic fluid was low. We thought that there was
Yes.
something wrong with that slide when we went to go look at
And
that
it
with you.
wasn't. Yeah, it just needed some hydraulic fluid. That's a big difference between this slide potentially needs to go into a shop to get repaired and it just needs hydraulic fluid. That's a huge difference in cost.
Absolutely. But it's now a great time to top them off. The other thing that people don't realize is the slide seals on the outside, that black material out there,
Mhm.
sometimes does need to be removed and replaced. But
Yes.
this is one thing we hear all the time. My slide is leaking. I leave it half out all the time. Well, that's because if you don't know, and a lot of people don't know this, if your
Yes.
slide is not fully extended or fully retracted, you have a potential leak point, period.
Yes.
Because that seal only works when it's fully extended or fully retracted. If the slide seal is bad, then you might have a leak point in addition to that spot. Find out that on that exterior inspection if those slide seals are starting to degrade. Oh, because that's one of the things that you're looking for. You need to make sure it's making proper contact. And this matters most when you're at a travel stop or something like that, or there's unexpected weather when your, slides are out and there's rain, because otherwise you might be tempted to leave that slide partially open if you're boondocking somewhere to get in and a storm comes in overnight and all of a sudden underneath your bed is full of water. That's because it's not fully sealed. So there's so many people that don't know that information. You want to do
And
is go
the
ahead.
other thing, sorry, while you're extending those slides, the other thing to do would also be to extend your awnings and let that fabric breathe so that
Yep.
the mold is not building up from any moisture that has gotten caught in there while that's been rolled up during snow or rain or ice or whatever.
Now, we're going to walk inside now and go inside and we're going to talk about interior checks. And so we talked a little bit about that, but your RV tells the story. So I want you to think about it this way. If your rig has been put away for the season and
Yes.
you walk in there, what do you think the sense that you need to use when you walk in there first is?
I'm going to say your sense of smell.
Yep. Before you turn on a light or open a cabinet, you want to just breathe in and smell. Does it smell musty? Does it smell earthy? Does it smell like critters? And yes, they smell funky. You often will see that before you see a visible sign of anything. A smell that wasn't there when you closed it up last season that's there now is potentially a problem. Okay. So,
Yeah.
one of the other things is ceiling stains. If you're inside and you notice a ceiling stain, even if you don't think that the roof's in bad condition, chances are over the winter there was a leak. So, from somewhere, and it could be something as simple as, a leaking AC gasket that's just deteriorated. But stains don't lie. They tell you kind of where the water is traveling from. And
Right.
so pay attention to those. We talked about this one a little bit. Press on the walls and the floor. Where do you think on the floor you'd mostly want to check? Your tanks are drained in some of these cases. So, like,
Mhm.
you're not expecting the water to flow through them.
I would expect to need to check around the slides, around the doors, around the windows. Those would be my anywhere where there's an entrance or exit to the outside would be the first place that I would be checking the floors.
Well, and so many RV companies typically build with OSB. And the problem with building with OSB, it's like building with a sponge. Once it gets wet, it swells. And so as you're walking through, if you feel spots in the floor that maybe aren't soft, but they feel swollen, that's kind of like the first warning sign that you've got a bigger problem.
And for people who might not know, can you tell them what OSB stands for?
So it's basically that chipped board that you can find in Lowe's or Home Depot that looks like it's kind of been mashed together and smashed and it's
Mhm.
kind of one great big piece of wood now. The problem with OSB is it is a giant sponge. It's a cheaper board and so a lot of places use it. Unfortunately, because it's not a full wood board, I mean it's wood but it's chipped
But
board
it's
pressed
chipped.
together. It's
Yeah.
paper mache, essentially. So it swells up and, as it gets wet. And so a lot of times that's the first, inclination, even on a roof that you've got
Yeah,
water damage is you've got part of your roof that's swollen. Would you check every cabinet, do you think?
I would
Yeah.
because you don't know where those critters are.
And what are you looking for if you're looking for critters?
Uh, I am looking for droppings. I am also looking for any type of like shredded anything because if a piece of paper anything was left in the trailer, they will find it and they will nest with it. They just will.
Well,
They
and
just
and
will.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard all sorts of stories as an RV roofing specialist about what gets into your rig. I mean, we've heard it all. We've had customers
Yeah.
call us and say, "There's raccoons that got into my rig from the roof into the rig and chewed their way in." And they wake up and they have, raccoons, "Hello, friend," and they're, eating out of your cupboards. And, squirrels can do the same thing. Mice do a lot of damage to wiring. So
Mhm.
the next thing I'd tell you is if you can plug it in and check all your lights.
Yeah.
So check your electrical systems, that sort of thing. Check your refrigerator. Make sure it's opens, the lights are still working. If you can't plug in to check all of this, if you're in a storage unit or something like that, if you have a generator, that's a great way to do it. But you want to make sure that there's no electrical failures that could happen because something started chewing something. So, what do you think temperature swings do to all of your? And we talked a little bit about this, but I mean, how do you think they impact everything?
Well, I mean, you just think about like a bridge and the way that they have to build a bridge to allow that metal to expand and contract. That's essentially what your RV is built to do. That's why you've got pieces of tape going down the wall because your RV is going to expand and contract. It's those same laws of physics apply to the materials that's in your rig that you're witnessing on a fridge that you're crossing in the wintertime.
Right. The temperature fluctuation alone is, without even a single drop of water getting in, can be substantial.
Mm.
If you're swinging between warm days and super cold nights, that can cause condensation on interior surfaces without a water leak. Your windows, your metal frames, anything that has an exterior wall, condensation can saturate the insulation even. So you want to check all of that. And you're not always having to look for those problems, although they could be there. You just want to be
Mhm.
mindful about it.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. So knowing what to look for is the purpose of this, not to scare you, but to actually give you the tools you need to do a good thorough inspection.
Yeah.
All right. So my next one is safety systems. What would you say are some of the safety systems that we're like talking about in this situation?
I would be checking my smoke detectors, my carbon monoxide detector, but I would also be checking like my TPMS, making sure that the little monitors on my tires still have, batteries that work, and that whole system is still running, because I rely on that to keep my family safe as I'm going down the road. So I would be checking any system that keeps my family safe. I'd be checking them all.
Yeah. So, I mean, another one I would say is your LP, your gas detectors for your
Yep.
propane. And then this is a great time to say, change out your fire extinguisher if it's expired. Have a fresh fire extinguisher ready to go, because most people don't realize, like, even carbon monoxide detectors, so many people will let that go because they
Yeah.
never use it. But when you need it, you need it. Smoke detectors are going to respond to combustion particles in the air. So they're an alert for fire. You want to make sure you're safe, and you can't see a lot of the smells that you could possibly be exposed to. You want to make sure they're calibrated correctly. But batteries, is another thing. I think we overlook the fire extinguishers more often than we don't in some cases.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. It's there from last year. We never used it. I don't want to spend the money on a new one. But check and see when it expired, because if you do have an issue, you want to have that handy. It's not a bad idea to keep a second fire extinguisher in case of an emergency. Put it under your sink. Put it somewhere where you can access it if you need to, if it gets out of hand. But that being said, call 911 if you ever do really have a fire. But I know we used ours one year when we had a bearing issue where we
Mhm.
pulled it really fast from the doorway. And so, like, you never know where you're going to need it. Another thing to check is your first aid kit. And I know you've got a really cool first aid kit that you were introduced
Yeah,
to.
we do.
But this is a great time to, like, talk about why you should have a first aid kit in the RV.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's gonna happen. In the same way that anything can happen if you are sitting in a house, even more so, anything can happen when you are driving down a road. And sometimes we are out hiking, or we're out far away from where anybody can get to us. We need to be able to tend to injuries and illnesses in a timely manner. And so it is so important to have a good first aid kit that can not take care of the problem 100%, because I don't think that there is a first aid kit out there that can do that, but can tend to the problem and keep you safe until you can get to help for
Yeah.
whatever the situation is. And you were talking about the fire extinguishers expiring, and that made me think of, and this is on a completely different subject from first aid kits, but you would need a first aid kit if you were not keeping up on this. I can promise you that. Checking your propane tanks to make sure that they have not expired and that all of that is still safe and up to speed for using. That is so important.
Well, we're going to jump right into propane since you went there, because that's exactly my
Awesome.
next item on the list. All right. So, I mean, I don't fully understand propane. So I have some notes here. I just know that when my shower turns on, if we don't have propane in the tank, we are not taking hot showers. And so, but essentially, your propane flows through the tanks with usually a regulator, and the pressure
Mhm.
reaches your appliances. So, depending on your appliances, for example, I don't have a propane oven, nor do I have a propane refrigerator, but a lot of people do. Those are also connection points where propane leaks can develop.
Yes.
And cold weather can accelerate that risk. Hoses will stiffen and become frozen in freezing temperatures. Regulators will weaken or fail. Small leaks that maybe weren't even there last fall are now possibly there in the spring. So, one of those things that you can do is, again, your carbon monoxide, having that good is very important. But, you can have an RV tech come out and check everything if you need to. It's all about peace of mind. I mean,
Yeah.
it's propane is heavier than air. So unlike natural gas, which rises and will dissipate Propane will sink and collect on the floor in areas that you don't even know it's there and you can't smell it a lot of times. So that's why your
Mhm.
propane detector is often down toward the floor. It's
Yep.
an early warning system and it's designed to alert you before your nose can detect that. By the time you can smell propane, it's already really bad. And so an expired or unplugged or non-functioning detector isn't just useless, it'll create almost like a false sense of security. Check your propane levels, visually inspect all of the hoses for cracking or stiffness. Test each appliance for proper ignition. If you have an older camper, maybe that means you're hand lighting it. Know the rules to that. What you shouldn't try. If you're having a micro leak, how do you know if you're having a micro leak? Those are all great questions to ask your RV tech because I'm not one and I can't give you that answer. But you want a certified technician with proper testing equipment and propane knowledge. Not all RV techs actually are propane certified. So make sure you're talking to a propane certified technician because with the naked eye, you're just going to be guessing.
Yeah.
All right. Tires,
Yes.
pressure. Do they lose tire pressure when they're in
They sure
storage?
do. Just like your car does, I think about anytime the temperature drops and my car starts, or my truck in this instance now, but long time ago, my car would start dinging at me to tell me that my tire pressure was off. Same thing happens in your rig. It's been setting out in the changing temperature, the air pressure has changed. And so you need to be checking that. You need to be filling your tires where they need to be filled. That's just, it has to happen, or you will get a flat, or you will have a blowout, or you will lose control, or something will happen. So check your tire pressure. It's so important.
Well, and I think tires are another one of those things that we just kind of glance at and think, oh, I'm good. I replaced
Yes,
those 3 years ago. But how many miles ago was that?
that's so
How's the
long.
tread? Is there a
And
bulge in the tire?
that gives me another really good point, and this is something that came up again with the rig that we're getting ready to buy. Just because your tread looks okay does not mean that your tires do not need to be replaced. We are getting a rig where the tires have not been replaced since the rig was bought. It's a
And what year is that?
2018. This is a 2018. These are 2017 tires. And if you're unsure of how to figure out what year your tires are, it says it on the side wall of the tires. It's built into the coating on the side of the tire wall. The very kind, lovely couple that we are buying the RV from, the tires, the tread looks great. They haven't had to drive very far. And so they just thought our tires are fine. We don't need to trade them out. But in actuality, there's a lot of risk there in the fact that the
Yep.
tires are that old. So we are getting them changed immediately. We've already ordered the tires for when we pick up the rig next week, and they are waiting for us at Discount Tire right now as we speak. So it's very,
Right.
very important to stay up
Well,
on that.
your PSI can drop 10 degrees in cold weather. It can be a big thing, but pressure is
Mhm.
only the beginning. We talked about sidewalls. Did you know UV exposure can affect your tires too?
I did. Yes.
You can see that sometimes on a quick walk around, and that's why so many people cover their tires when they're at a location. So, what are you looking for in the spring? Well, run your hand along the tire. I know it sounds crazy. If you don't like getting dirty, put a glove on. But web-like patterns or fine cracks, anything like that is a cause for not concern, but just be mindful of it. Bulging is an absolute no-go. One of the things I think a lot of people do with tires, and Frank taught me this probably our first year on the road, is if you've got to replace one, you've got to replace two. Don't just replace one tire. Make sure you're doing that in sets. If you can't afford, I have a dually. I mean, a dually plus a fifth wheel. So we have 12 tires at any given point. We try to offset those costs by doing one halfway through a year and then the other one halfway through a year. But still, 6 tires is 6 tires. So you got to budget for it. And, if you're on the road any length of time, the other thing is bearings. If you're the type of person that's going out doing 3 camping trips a year, or maybe you're a work camper like the couple you bought the rig from,
Mhm.
where they didn't go far and they went kind of back
Yeah.
and forth to these locations, you still have to do the regular maintenance. Can you be a DIYer and save some money? Sure, but you have to do it the right way. That's the big thing. So going and buying tires from Discount Tire is very different than going and buying discount tires from like the corner store that has used tires on an RV. And so if that's all you can afford for a temporary fix, that's one thing. but you need to make sure your tire's in good shape because a tire blowout on the road can destroy your RV.
Yes.
The other thing is valve stems. So the valve
Yes.
stem can actually, did you know it can actually like fail over time, like crack and stuff?
I did, and I know that because we had it happen to us. I'm telling you, if it can happen, it'll happen to the Martins.
But I mean, those are things that we don't always think to check. And so you mentioned the
Mhm.
TPMS system. There are dozens of TPMS systems out there. And, I don't want to say one is better than the other, but many are better than others.
Yes.
So, know the brand. I'd say don't shop cheap for a TPMS system. We have a screen inside the truck and it's saved our butt more times than I can count. Just in the last year alone. The tires are the only thing between you and the road, so if that fails, you just need to be ahead of it.
Yeah.
All right, batteries, generators. I mean, I grew up in the North, so when it got cold out and the car didn't start, you knew it was because the battery was depleted because of the weather. A weak battery in March can often become a dead battery in April. If you're getting to the storage unit in February and you're finding that the slides are creaking out slowly, you don't often think about your batteries on the rig until it stops working. But temperature is just part of the story. When you're storing your batteries, they self-discharge, even when nothing's
Yeah.
drawing powder from them. So a lot of times we, like in the blog for prepping your RV for winter, we told you to detach them, and that helps. Because when it's sitting there for weeks or months, you're getting what's called a deep discharge. So it can reduce the battery's output.
Now, I've heard, and I wonder what your opinion is on this, again, because we haven't had to do it, so I don't know. But I've heard that if you are storing your RV over the winter, in addition to detaching your batteries, that it's a good idea to also go back and reattach them and like pull out your slides occasionally or do something that kind of just keeps the juices rolling, if you will. Have you heard anything about that, or can you speak to that at all? Is that something that you would recommend people do?
So, I mean, the reality is, if you're not using your rig all winter, and let's just say you do have it covered, obviously you're not going to want to go do that every month, especially in the winter
Right.
months. But if you're doing that, store your batteries in a cool, dry place, either in your house, possibly your laundry room, or possibly, a well enclosed wall in the garage if you have one, because that'll keep them working longer. And if it does get below freezing, you just want to make sure they're moved so that they don't have any long-term issues. But, midwinter or early spring battery check takes less than 15 minutes and it can save you lots of frustrating problems later down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the roof, I mean, it's kind of the most important part of the spring prep. And I feel like I, talk about roofs all the time because that's what I do. But worn sealant is a really big deal. Dried crack sealant is a really big deal. If you
Mhm.
notice that your roof is chalking and you have a fiberglass roof, that's often the sign of degradation, and it means that your UV coating is non-existent anymore in most cases.
Yeah.
You need to focus on things like the vents, the AC units, the antennas, the seams. You want to look at the gasket and see kind of how is your AC sitting up there. If it looks like it's like tipped to one side, chances are your gasket is failing. And it depends on the year. Gaskets will last,
Yeah.
anywhere between 5 and 10 years, depending on the brand. So, do you need to have a certified mobile tech pull out your AC and change out your gasket from time to time? Well, unless you have some pretty experienced time doing stuff like that, I recommend it unless you're an electrician, because if you disconnect your AC and you rewire it wrong, you now
Mhm.
get to replace the AC.
Oh, that sounds like a treat.
Yeah. So know when to call a pro is what I would say.
Yeah.
If your roof is starting to show its age or you have moisture concerns, this is the time to get eyes on it from a certified technician or Nationwide RV Roofing Company. It's a smart way to do it. You can always send us pictures and give us some idea of what's going on up there, and we'll just do a consult one-on-one. Those consults are 100% free. So if you have concerns about your roof and you're like, what do I do with this? I can tell you if the sealant most of the time is in okay condition. Our system is a little bit more advanced. And so our customers don't have a lot of the same problems that you do with caulk. But at the same time, knowing what you're looking at is half the battle. So
Yeah.
some things to not forget: check your registration.
That's such a good one.
And with that, you might as well check your insurance, make sure everything's good to go.
Yeah.
Make sure your camping memberships are paid up. And if you live in a state that requires emission stickers, are they up to date?
Yes.
If you left any food in there over the winter, please check the expiration date.
Yes.
um,
That's such a good idea.
there's lots of other things. Tasha, are there any other tips and tricks that you think, like, let's talk about it in terms of you just bought a rig. And so some
Mhm.
of these things that you just learned about buying a rig, what would you say your takeaways would be if you were talking about this? Because you're looking at this rig kind of the same way we would look at a rig at the beginning of a season.
Yes. One of the things that we are looking at specifically for this rig, we have never had a toy hauler before. And one of the things that we realized when we did our walk around and started really looking at it is that there was delamination in the back door, the ramp of the toy hauler. And it's pretty bad. I mean, it's been treated in a way that it doesn't look as bad, but when you look at it a little bit closer, you can tell that there is some significant damage there. And that's just from obviously it was probably left out when some rain came through, or you with a toy hauler with a deck like that, you have to pull that in if the weather comes in, and a lot of people don't realize that. Even with the newer models that have kind of a rain proof, I don't want to say rain proof because that's not the right terminology, but a water sensitive coating to try and protect it is what I will call it. Even those are able to get some damage when they are left open in a wet environment. So checking that to make sure that that's not damaged. I was actually really surprised by, I mean, I'm not saying that it's cheap, it's not cheap, but it was not as expensive as I feared it was going to be for us to get that repaired. And we've just decided to completely replace the door because it ended up being about the same as it would have been to completely take it apart and put brand new wood in the middle. So that's something I would be checking the ramp of your toy hauler if you have a toy hauler. If you have a toy hauler, checking to make sure that like the tanks that hold the fuel don't leak. There's just so many things that I didn't think about because we're moving up from a travel trailer, and I don't store fuel in a travel trailer except for my propane, but that is something that you have to be mindful of. You do have to check.
Well, the other thing is when we looked at that rig with you, we forgot to check two things. One was whether the oven turned on or not. And so that's why propane was on my list. But I
Yes.
didn't even talk about this one is flushing your tanks in the spring and getting all
Mhm.
of the stuff out so that you have good water
Yep.
and making sure everything's flushed
Yep.
properly so you're not drinking anything that can harm you, and making sure all of the pink juice is out of your rig. And I'm sure if you've prepped for winter, you've drained all the tanks, but then making sure you fill all your tanks
Gotta
to make sure
yeah.
nothing's leaking there.
And really cleaning that. And, that's something that I've got on the list for us to kind of talk about in our next episode too, is just making sure that you're sanitizing really well. You're really giving those tanks a good, in my camper, it's a good like 10 through. It's not a once through. I'm like, let's sanitize again because I want that water to be clean when I drink it. And that's another thing. If you have a water filter system, make sure that it's hooked up right. Make sure that, everything, all of your tubes and all of your hoses and everything are in good shape.
But
Just
when you turn your
checking
water
all
on
of
in the
that.
spring, it's always smart to open up your cupboards and watch underneath to make sure nothing has come loose or maybe expanded and contracted in a way that there's a leak. If your rig had water in it in the wintertime and it was left in a place that froze, if that froze, one of the biggest misconceptions I think is that if it's cold outside, leave your water dripping.
Yeah.
Not in an RV.
No.
So your best bet in those situations, if you're spending the time in a cold environment, is to fill your tanks, use the water from your tanks during that time, and
Mhm.
then go back to using the water the regular way, hooked up to the pedestal when you have warm enough temperatures to do that. Sometimes
Yeah.
that means you're going to disconnect that water every night, depending
Yep.
on where you are in the country. That's just kind of one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, because the reality is if you're dripping your water overnight and everything freezes all the way out, and now you've
Yep.
got frozen pipes. A lot of people wake up the next morning with a flood. inside the rig at that point. You don't want that either. Preparation is key, right? I mean, ultimately, that's where it comes down to. Well, I'm hoping this was educational for you. We're not professionals. We're not RV techs. We just have been doing this a couple days, and we don't do this in the winter most places. I know Tasha and I both went to Florida this winter. It's about to get cold here again, but a lot of these tips and tricks we're going to use again this weekend. And so
I just packed my coat back up, and I think I'm going to have to get it back out.
I don't
And
think it's going to be that bad.
I'm just disappointed in Florida,
But it's warmer than everywhere else.
It is, but I can't say 10 out of 10 this year, Florida. You've let me down. The fact that I had to pull my winter coat out of my little storage bag, it's just not okay.
Well, you're here at Learn to RV, the podcast. We try to be entertaining, informative. Somebody said edutainment. And so that's kind of a good word for that. We'd love for you to follow along, listen in wherever you listen. We're now streaming on almost everywhere.
Oh, and we are going to be starting a new segment, and we keep forgetting to talk about it. So I have to talk about it. We would love to share your favorite campfire stories. So if you have that one story that is just that you are not going to believe what happened to me, the Martins have got the Martin Mayhem, and it just keeps on coming. But I know that the rest of y'all out there have got stories like ours. Please, please, please share them with us. You can email us your stories. Just write them in. We are going to be doing episodes where we read your stories aloud and share them. We want the funny, kooky stories that, not a whole community spotlight, but just that one story that was like, oh my goodness. Remember that one time when we did open up the cabinet and there was a squirrel that had fallen asleep in there? Those are the types of stories that we want. Okay. Jennifer, what is the email address that they need to email those stories to?
They'll want to email those stories to connect, CONNECT, at learntorv.com. And then we'll pick a handful of them and we'll read as many as we can. And who knows, it might even be a 2-hour episode that we have to turn into extra episodes for Patreon if we get enough of those. So, I mean, we love hearing other people's stories, not just our own. Elevating others is kind of my jam. So,
and be sure to let us know if we can share your name.
Yes.
We don't want to share any information if you don't want it shared. Just let us know in your email and we will respect your wishes.
But you can write in and say, if you're okay with sharing your name, you can say, kind of old school style. This is Sally from Oklahoma City, and maybe Sally from Oklahoma City will now write us. Who knows? I don't know a Sally in Oklahoma City, so I'm just making it up. But if you want to stay anonymous, we can say we have this anonymous story from, somewhere in, Bismarck, North Dakota, or, Canada or Hawaii. I mean, if you travel by map and maybe you RV somewhere else, or whatever those crazy stories are.
Allie in the Alliance, maybe that's how they'll send their names in. You saw it. Isn't that great?
So follow along, join the community, follow Learn to RV, and share this episode with an RVer that needs to hear this before they head out on the road this spring. We're glad you're here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll talk to you on the other side.